Who do you think you are staring at that contract? Your kind can barely read, let alone understand what $4 billion means. Sterling Davis's voice sliced through the marble silence. He said it in Arabic, smug, confident she wouldn't understand. He stood 3 feet from Ammani Lewis, 12 years old, the housekeeper's daughter, a bright-skinned black girl with a storm of tight curls pinned back by a cheap plastic clip. Her small fingers clutched the vase she'd been dusting, crystal worth more than her mother's annual pay. Before she could move, Sterling yanked it from her hands and smashed it against the floor. The explosion of glass filled the room. Ammani froze, shards glittering around her bare ankles. Her wrist throbbed where he'd grabbed it. At the far end of the room, Harrison Taylor, billionaire and self-proclaimed visionary, looked up from his $250 million oil contract. The pen hovered above the signature line. His ice blue eyes flicked from the glass to the trembling girl. Then he laughed. And in Arabic, he replied, "Don't blame the child. Animals can't help breaking things." The words struck harder than the broken vase. Ammani's head dropped, but her eyes burned. She understood every syllable, every insult, every ounce of contempt. What happens in the next 4 minutes will leave them speechless. But first you need to see who this little girl really is, 6 hours earlier. The alarm shrieked at 4:45 a.m. in a cramped Bronx apartment that smelled of bleach and exhaustion. Grace Lewis, 44, groaned before her feet even touched the cold floor. Her hands already ached, the deep, throbbing pain that came from 12 years of scrubbing marble floors she'd never be allowed to walk on freely. She couldn't afford painkillers, couldn't afford a doctor, couldn't afford to stop. 2 buses, 85 minutes, and a prayer later, Grace arrived at the Manhattan penthouse at 6:30 sharp. Harrison Taylor's 42nd floor palace gleamed like a museum. Marble, glass, silence. A vase in the hallway alone could feed them for half a year. She started in the kitchen, polishing copper pots that hadn't seen fire, wiping down an $8,000 espresso machine she wasn't allowed to use. At 7:15, Harrison swept through mid-call, talking about oil rights and investors. $250 million, he said, like it was pocket change. He passed her without a glance, 12 years and still didn't know her name. At 8:45, he stopped at the guest bathroom she'd just finished. "I smell something," he muttered, loud enough for her to hear. "Do it again." Grace's stomach knotted. She had done it perfectly. But she picked up the rag again, knelt, and started over, because her daughter needed to eat. Invisible. That's what she was. At 3 p.m., Ammani's arrived from public school. Navy uniform, frayed shoes, backpack heavy with taped-up textbooks. She'd gotten through another day of dodging bullies and broken calculators. Her scholarship to the private academy, rejected. Too middle income, they said. She found her mother in the master bedroom, changing Harrison's sheets. "Hey, Mama," she whispered, careful not to disturb the air. Grace smiled, tired. "We got important people coming tonight. Let's stay quiet, okay? Extra invisible." Invisible, the word that ruled their lives. But Ammani had her own secret light. From her backpack, she pulled out a worn Arabic-English dictionary. Gold-edged, leather-bound, older than her mother, her great-grandfather's. Sergeant Isaiah Lewis, a Wu Monuments man who'd risked his life protecting priceless artifacts from Nazi looters. Every page filled with his notes in looping Arabic and English. How to read truth in ink, how to see what others ignore. Since she was 8, she'd studied it like a holy text. That's why, when Harrison and Sterling spoke Arabic hours later, she understood. And soon they would understand who they'd just humiliated. She'd taught herself Arabic, not from tutors or private academies, but from free YouTube videos, MIT OpenCourseWare. and a second-hand library card that smelled like dust and ink. Every word she learned came from sweat, not privilege. Her great-grandfather's odd dictionary, filled with faded blue notes, was her mentor from beyond the grave, his handwriting a ghost that guided her hand. By 12, Ammani Lewis could read classical Arabic poetry, write formal correspondence, identify dialects from Egypt to the Gulf. She'd placed third in the regional language competition, beating high school seniors, private school prodigies, and kids with tutors who cost more than her mother's rent. The judges were stunned. Nobody expects genius from a black girl in a public school uniform. Now, in the penthouse, she flipped open the cracked leather cover. Faded blue ink whispered from the page. Truth has a quiet voice, Ammani, but it's the loudest sound in a room full of lies. He'd written it like he knew she'd need it today. Then came the voices in the living room, low, commanding, expensive. Grace froze mid-fold. "They're early," she whispered. "We need to stay out of the way." Ammani tucked the dictionary under her arm. The door opened, and wealth entered like a storm. Sterling Davis came first, silver hair, perfect tie, and a suit that cost more than Grace's yearly income. Two other men followed, their confidence dripping from every polished shoe. Harrison greeted them warmly, grinning like equals. Grace appeared like a shadow with a tray of $200 crystal glasses. Sterling didn't even glance at her as he took one. "I'm surprised you let staff bring children to work, Harrison," he said, voice loud enough for everyone. "Unprofessional." His eyes landed on Ammani in the corner, clutching her book. Harrison frowned. "Grace, I thought we discussed this." Grace went pale. "Sir, her after-school program was canceled and—" "I don't need the explanation," he interrupted. "Just keep her quiet and out of sight." Sterling's associate laughed. "A kid here? Some people just don't understand boundaries." Another smirked. "Probably can't afford a babysitter." The words cut deep. Grace shrank, her shoulders folded in, her dignity collapsing with her. Ammani felt her mother's hand tremble as she pulled her toward the kitchen. "It's okay, Mama," Ammani whispered. But it wasn't. It would never be. An hour later, the meeting began. Harrison sat behind a mahogany table, Sterling across from him, flanked by the same men. Catherine Taylor, Harrison's wife, poured coffee, the only one who ever thanked Grace. "I'll leave you to your business," she said softly. As soon as she left, Sterling switched tongues. "Shall we discuss in Arabic?" The men nodded. The room shifted. Ammani stood across the room, dusting bookshelves, white earbuds in, music off. Her face blank, her mind sharp as glass. Sterling's eyes flicked to her. "Does the cleaning woman's child understand anything beyond basic English?" he said in Arabic. Harrison laughed. "Her? She probably thinks Arabic is a kind of bread." Laughter followed, thick, careless. Sterling continued in Arabic, voice dripping disdain. "Why do you allow these people in your home? The mother is barely competent. The child? Disrespectful to bring her here." His associates joined in. "In my country," one said, "we'd never let her kind touch valuables. Good for manual labor, nothing more." Harrison smirked. "My wife believes in kindness. She forgets kindness doesn't mean much to people at their left." Sterling's smile was blade thin. "They don't appreciate kindness, only their place." His gaze landed on Ammani. "Look at her. Probably can't spell billion. Those cheap shoes, that ridiculous book, as if reading could change what she is." He added a slur. The laughter that followed was colder than marble. Ammani's hand froze on the shelf. Her knuckles went white, but she didn't turn. Harrison joined in. "I pay her mother $18 an hour. Generous, considering no education. The child will clean houses too. It's in their blood." Sterling nodded. "Natural order." The third man leaned forward. Does she even attend school? Or is her mother training her to scrub toilets? Harrison's laugh was the loudest. Public school, the kind with metal detectors. She'll be pregnant by 16. They always are. Something broke quietly inside her, but she kept dusting, steady as ever. Then Sterling pulled a cylindrical case from his briefcase. "Enough about the help," he said in Arabic before switching to English. "Harrison, prepare to see history." He unrolled the parchment, yellowed paper, ornate Arabic calligraphy, a red wax seal. "This," he said, "is the original land deed, 1680, Al-Noor Oasis, undisputed ownership, mineral rights beneath." Harrison's eyes widened. "How much?" "At least 250 million in oil reserves," Sterling said smoothly. But Ammani's gaze sharpened. She'd studied forgeries since she was 8. Her great-grandfather's notes on vellum, seals, and ink echoed in her mind. The paper was too perfect, too smooth, the ink too black, sitting on top instead of bleeding in. And the seal, oh, wrong bird. It showed an eagle. The original Al-Noor crest had a falcon. Tiny difference, fatal mistake. They weren't just arrogant, they were criminals, trying to steal a fortune with a fake. And a 12-year-old black girl in a public school uniform was the only one in the room who knew. And Ammani Lewis, the 12-year-old who supposedly couldn't spell billion, was the only one in the room who knew the truth. She stood invisible in the corner, dust rag in hand, heart drumming, mind burning with a decision. Stay silent and survive, or speak and shatter the illusion. The meeting dragged on for another hour. Sterling's voice floated through the room, painting fantasies of oil wealth and restored dynasties, his tone smooth as poison. Harrison leaned forward, hanging on every word, seeing legacy, not lies. At 5:15 p.m., the men finally broke. Sterling and his associates stepped out to the balcony, lighting cigars that cost more than Grace's rent. Harrison excused himself to his private study for a phone call. Grace appeared with her quiet shadow step, trash bins in hand. "Come help me, baby," she whispered. Together they moved through the penthouse, mother and daughter ghosts in a golden tomb. When they reached Harrison's study, Grace hesitated. "Quickly now," she said, "before he comes back." Ammani lifted the heavy leather wastebasket beside his desk. Inside, shredded papers, narrow white strips with Arabic text still visible. Her breath caught. She knelt, fingers trembling as she began piecing together fragments on the rug. "Ammani, what are you doing?" Grace hissed. "We don't have time." "Just a second, Mama, please." Her eyes darted over the fragments. Words jumped out. Dubai Commercial Bank, routing numbers, Abu Dhabi Ministry of Energy. But the addresses were wrong, off by whole streets. Wire transfers dated 3 months ago, mismatched dollar amounts. She recognized a pattern, a trail. "Ammani!" Grace's voice rose in panic. Footsteps echoed down the hall. Ammani scrambled to shove the papers back into the basket. They slipped out the door just as Harrison's shadow filled the doorway. But she'd seen enough. Sterling wasn't just lying, he was laundering millions. At 6:30 p.m., Grace told her they could finally go home. The men were dining now. They took the service elevator down, exhausted, their bones heavy with silence. In the lobby, Grace's phone buzzed, a message from Catherine Taylor. Sterling's associate left a briefcase in the kitchen. "Can you bring it back up? They're returning at 8 p.m. Grace sighed. "We have to go back up, baby." At 7:45, they returned. The penthouse was quiet, candlelight flickering in the dining room where Harrison and Catherine ate. In the kitchen, the black briefcase waited on the marble counter like a warning. "Wait here," Grace whispered. "I'll tell Mrs. Taylor we brought it." She disappeared down the hall. Silence. Then, voices in Arabic. Ammani froze. They weren't supposed to be back until 8. The study door stood slightly ajar. She crept forward, breath shallow, and slipped into the supply closet beside it. She left a sliver of space to see through. Sterling and his 2 associates entered. Their words came rapid, sharp, Arabic stripped of politeness. "Tomorrow at exactly 5 p.m., Sterling said, "the wire transfer goes through, 250 million straight to our Dubai account." Laughter followed. "Can't believe he fell for it," one said. "The deed looks authentic to amateurs. Americans are so arrogant." "Especially rich ones," Sterling replied. "They think money buys intelligence. He never even checked if Al Noor Oasis exists where we claimed." Ammani's eyes widened. "It does exist," another added. "Just 400 meters away. Worthless sand. No oil, no water. By the time he verifies, we'll be gone." "And the fake ministry permits?" "Cairo calligrapher. Cost 50,000. Beautiful work, except the crest. Eagle instead of falcon." They laughed, raising their glasses. "This is our 6th job. London, Monaco, Paris. Over 800 million in 3 years. Tomorrow we cross 1 billion. The words crashed over her like fire. Then came something colder. "What about the cleaning woman? The one with the child?" Pause. "What about her? She was here all afternoon. What if she overheard?" Tense silence. Then Sterling chuckled. "She's illiterate. Barely speaks English. Definitely not Arabic, don't worry." They clinked glasses and left. The door clicked shut. Ammani stayed pressed against the wall, shaking, not with fear, but fury. 10 minutes later, Grace found her there. "Baby, what are you doing in—" She stopped. "Why are you crying?" "Mama," Ammani whispered, "we need to talk." On the long, rattling 85-minute bus ride back to the Bronx, she told her everything. Every word, every lie, every detail of the billion-dollar fraud. Grace's face went pale. "No, absolutely not. We are not getting involved." "Mama, they're stealing 250 million from the man who called you an animal." Grace's voice cracked. "The same man who made me scrub clean bathrooms twice? You want to save him?" "It's not about him," Ammani said softly. "It's about what's right." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "What's right doesn't feed us, baby. What's right gets people like us killed." But Ammani just stared out the window, city lights flickering across her face, fire building behind her eyes. She'd been invisible long enough. Tomorrow, the world would see her. Grace Lewis's voice trembled, but her grip on her daughter's hands was iron. "This job is all that's keeping us alive. You make trouble, we lose everything. Our apartment, food, school. Is that what you want, baby?" Ammani looked into her mother's tired eyes. Those same eyes that had once been bright and brave, now dulled by years of bleach and broken promises. Her mother's words were truth, but so was something else. She thought of Sergeant Isaiah Lewis, who faced Nazi gunfire to protect art that wasn't even his. He could have stayed silent, too. He didn't. That night, sleep refused her. By 2 a.m., the glow of the library laptop lit her small kitchen table. The search bar became her battleground. Sterling Davis fraud, Al Noor Oasis scam, fake oil deeds Arabic. The results read like a trail of blood money. London, Beirut, Monaco. 3 confirmed victims, nearly $500 million stolen. Tomorrow at 5 p.m., Harrison Taylor Bott would become number 4. Her stomach turned cold. She could stay invisible, or she could become her great-grandfather's echo. When dawn broke, she'd made her decision. Grace noticed it the moment she woke. Something electric in her daughter's eyes. "You didn't sleep, did you?" Ammani shook her head. "I can't. Mama, they're thieves. I heard them say it. I can prove it." Grace's sigh was long and heavy, full of every hard year she'd survived. "You're just like him," she said softly. "Isaiah Lewis, always chasing truth, no matter the cost." Her voice cracked. "Promise me you'll be careful. We can't afford courage right now." But Ammani didn't promise. Their 85-minute bus ride and into Manhattan felt like traveling between worlds, the grimy seats, flickering lights, the smell of damp coats, and beyond that, the glass towers that held her fate. By 6:30 Amas, they arrived. The penthouse gleamed like always, soulless, spotless, cold. Grace went to the kitchen. Ammani lingered in the hallway, clutching the worn, leather-bound Arabic-English dictionary to her chest. The same one that had survived war, the same one her great-grandfather used to expose art forgeries under candlelight. Now it was her turn. She slipped into Harrison's private study. The desk was immaculate, documents laid out in predatory precision. The ancient parchment deed was at the center, ink glinting gold beneath the morning light. She pulled out her phone and began snapping photos, every signature, every page. Then she opened her great-grandfather's notes, turning to his sketches of Arabic seals. Her breath quickened. The eagle's wings curved outward, wrong. The authentic UAE algae crest used a falcon, wings tucked. It was subtle, deliberate, devastating. She photographed the forged crest, then the legitimate one from the UAE National Archives. Website she de-bookmarked last night. The colors, the wax, the script, all off. This wasn't a historic deed. It was an expensive lie. Footsteps echoed down the marble hall. Her heart seized. She shoved her phone in her pocket and grabbed her feather duster just as Harrison walked by, voice booming about oil reserves and profits. He didn't even glance her way. The air seemed to hold its breath until he passed. Then, trembling but unbroken, she continued, translating line by line using her great-grandfather's dictionary and an app. The text made no historical sense. Dates mismatched, terminology from the wrong era, modern cities referenced centuries too early. A perfect forgery, but still a forgery. She compiled everything. Side-by-side comparisons, translations, photos, source links, building a digital truth powerful enough to destroy billionaires. At a 10:47 a.m., she looked at the desk clock. The $250 million transfer was scheduled for 5 p.m. sharp. 6 hours and 13 minutes left. By 2:30 p.m., Sterling Davis arrived in a storm of confidence, flanked by his associates, tailored suits, smug grins, arrogance masked as charm. Grace worked silently in the kitchen. Ammani stayed near the living room bookshelf, invisible again, dusting the same spot she dusted yesterday. The men joked, toasted, and boasted of a new empire being born. Catherine Taylor served them imported coffee in delicate china cups worth more than Grace's yearly wage. She offered Ammani a kind smile across the room, but Ammani couldn't return it. Her pulse thundered like the ticking clock above the mantel. At 4 p.m. They moved into the study for the final signing. Grace prepared champagne and caviar for celebration. Ammani stood frozen in the hallway, phone in her hand. Every truth she'd uncovered burned in her pocket. She was 12, just a cleaner's daughter. Who would listen? Then she remembered her great-grandfather's words, words she read 100 times in the margins of his dictionary. Truth has a quiet voice, Ammani, but it's the loudest sound in a room full of lies. She took a breath that felt like destiny. At 4:56 p.m., she stepped into the study, silent, deliberate, almost invisible. Harrison's golden pen hovered above the signature line. Sterling leaned close, whispering, "Sign here, my friend. This is your legacy." Her eyes flicked to the crystal vase beside her, the twin of the one Sterling had smashed yesterday. Her fingers brushed it lightly. This time, the breaking would mean something. And Ammani Lewis, 12 years old, made the most important choice of her life. Her hand didn't just touch the vase, She pushed it deliberately. The vase tipped on the shelf, wobbled for one terrible second, then crashed violently to the marble floor. The explosion of shattering glass was deafening in the quiet study. Everyone froze instantly. Every head snapped toward the sound. Ammani stood surrounded by shattered crystal, her hand still extended. For one long moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then Sterling Davis's face twisted with absolute rage. He started shouting, "Not in English, in furious Arabic! You stupid little—" The words poured out unchecked. "Your kind shouldn't even be allowed in civilized places like this. Look what you've done. You ignorant worthless." He used the same dehumanizing slur from yesterday, the one that made all the men laugh. He was so consumed with anger he completely forgot to pretend he was someone else. Harrison stared at the broken glass scattered everywhere at Ammani standing in the destruction. His face darkened with fury. "Grace!" he shouted toward the kitchen. "Get in here right now and control your daughter!" Sterling kept going in rapid Arabic, voice rising higher. "This is exactly what I was talking about yesterday, Harrison. These people have absolutely no respect for anything. No intelligence whatsoever. Just look at her standing there like the dumb animal she is." Catherine started to speak. "Sterling, I think that's quite enough." But Ammani's voice cut clearly through all the chaos. Crystal clear, perfectly calm, absolutely flawless in formal classical Arabic. "Mr. Taylor," she said, her young voice as steady as ancient stone. "These men standing in your study are not your business partners. They are professional thieves, and that document on your desk is an expertly crafted forgery." The entire room went completely silent. Sterling's mouth literally fell open mid-sentence, his next word dying unspoken. Harrison's gold pen froze exactly 1 inch above the signature line. The Lebanese associate's face drained of all color instantly. Catherine's eyes went wide with shock and dawning comprehension. Ammani stood calmly in the middle of broken crystal, still holding her great-grandfather's worn leather dictionary in both hands, looking directly into Harrison Taylor's stunned eyes. She switched smoothly to perfect English. "And I can prove every single word I just said. Nobody moved a muscle. Nobody drew a breath. The 12-year-old animal, who supposedly couldn't even spell the word billion, had just spoken absolutely perfect Arabic, and she was about to systematically destroy a $250 million international fraud scheme. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. Then Harrison's face transformed from shock to rage. "What did you just say?" Sterling recovered. First, forced laugh. A trick. She learned a few phrases. "Don't be absurd, Harrison. She's a child. What could she possibly know?" He waved dismissively at Ammani. "This is ridiculous." But Harrison was staring at Ammani. Confusion, suspicion, and something else. Fear. Grace appeared breathless, saw the glass, saw Ammani went pale. "Mr. Taylor, I'm so sorry." "Your daughter," Harrison said, eyes still on Ammani, "just interrupted my meeting in Arabic, claiming my contract is fraudulent." Grace's mouth opened. No sound. Sterling stepped between them. "This is clearly some kind of scam she's running. Maybe she's working with someone." "I'm not working with anyone," Ammani said, still holding her dictionary still in the glass. "Your deed is fake. The seal is wrong. The ink is wrong. Everything is wrong." Harrison's jaw clenched. "You're telling me my legal team, 3 Yale lawyers, missed what a 12-year-old cleaning girl spotted?" The way he said cleaning girl stung. Ammani didn't flinch. "Yes, because they don't read Arabic and they didn't check the details." Sterling's face reened. "This is outrageous! Are you seriously going to let a servant as brat destroy the deal of a lifetime based on childish fantasy?" He turned to Ammani, contemptuous. "What are you even doing here? You're supposed to be cleaning, not eavesdropping on conversations you couldn't possibly understand." "But I did understand," Ammani said, calm, steady. "I understood yesterday when you called me an animal, said I'd be pregnant by 16, said people like me only know enough English to say yes, sir." The room went silent. Catherine's hand covered her mouth. Grace's eyes filled with tears. Harrison stared at Sterling. "You said what?" Sterling's smile faltered. We were speaking Arabic. She couldn't have. But I did," Ammani said. "I understood every word. Just like last night when you talked about your other victims, London, Paris, Monaco, 800 million in 3 years. Sterling went white. The Lebanese associate stepped toward the door. Harrison held up one hand. "Nobody moves." Ice in his voice. He looked at him. "You overheard a private conversation in Arabic and understood it." "Yes, impossible," Sterling said quickly. "She's making it up. She learned a few phrases online." "The seal has an eagle," Ammani interrupted sharp. "The real Algame seal has a falcon. The ink is modern carbon-based, not iron gall, no oxidation, and the date references Sultan Ahmad II, but he didn't take power until 1691. Your deed is dated 1680. She looked at Harrison. "That's an 11-year mistake. Your lawyers missed it because they don't read classical Arabic, but I do." Silence. Ammani could hear her heartbeat. Harrison stared at her. The deed, Sterling. "How does a 12-year-old know about sultans and seals and iron gall ink?" Ammani held up the dictionary. "My great-grandfather was Sergeant Isaiah Lewis, monuments man in World War II. He saved art and documents. He taught me how to authenticate artifacts. Everything he knew is in this book." She opened it, showed the handwritten notes, careful sketches. "He spent 40 years studying forgeries. He taught me the best forgers always make one small mistake. Always." Harrison took the dictionary, stared at the pages, the meticulous notes in faded blue ink. Sterling moved toward the door. "Nobody moves," Harrison repeated. Deadly calm, he looked at Sterling. "Sit down, all of you. We're going through this document line by line. This is absurd. Sit down." Sterling sat. Sterling's mask cracked, but he tried rebuilding. He leaned forward, speaking rapid Arabic to Ammani. Low, threatening. "Little girl, you're making a dangerous mistake. Your mother needs this job." Ammani Lewis. Beside her, Grace Lewis, watched with a mother's terror and a working woman's calculation. Accidents happen on the subway. People fall onto tracks. Very tragic. Sterling's casual cruelty dangled in the air like cigarette smoke. Grace's gasp punctured the sentence. Ammani didn't answer with fear. She met Sterling's smug gaze and replied, not in textbook classical Arabic this time, but in colloquial Lebanese, sharp and immediate. "Your accent is very good, Mr. Davis, almost perfect." She smiled, the sort of smile that was a small scalpel. "But you made a mistake. You used kak for how are you? That's Levantine. In Emirati, you'd hear shlonak." Sterling's eyes went wide. He tried to recover with a laugh that sounded too loud. Ammani kept going, sliding dialects like cards from a deck. "Yesterday you said bitar for properly. That's Egyptian. In the Emirates they'd say bishakal sahi." The Lebanese associate moved in his seat. The second man's face pinched. Ammani's ear had been trained on accents like a hawk on currents of wind. She switched back to English, calm and unhurried. "They're not from Abu Dhabi." She held up her phone. "He's Lebanese. The second is Egyptian. The third? Maybe Emirati. Maybe not. But none of them are who they said they were. Look." She fed Harrison the photo evidence, the deed, the seal, side by side with the legitimate UAE ministry crest she'd pulled up last night. The differences were small to anyone not trained to look. An eagle where a falcon should be, Ottoman-tinged calligraphy where local script would sit, wax too bright, too polymer-like, not the slow-aged burgundy of an authentic seal. Harrison's thumb hovered, zooming. His hand trembled. "This is ridiculous. A child with a phone?" Sterling barked, trying to sound superior. "The date is wrong," Ammani said louder now, stronger. "Check Sultan Ahmad too. The dates don't line up. Check the legal phrasing against 17th century documents, or just call the UAE Ministry of Interior. They'll tell you in 30 seconds. Catherine, already on edge, snapped. Harrison, call them, now! She fumbled for her phone with hands that had been steady for parties and broken for this moment. Sterling's grin thinned into a gray mask. Harrison's face rotated through disbelief to a cold, sinking fury. You were going to steal $250 million from me? He said slowly, the words heavy as iron. Using a forged document in a language you assumed I couldn't verify? How many others? Harrison asked the Lebanese man, voice stripped of civility. The Lebanese associate made for the door. Grace screamed. Catherine moved faster, blocking the exit with a single decisive step. Nobody leaves, she said. Not a plea, but a command. Harrison spoke into his phone. Security, now! Call the police and get me Professor Omar Wilson at Georgetown. Arabic Studies. Tell him I need a live verification. His voice, brittle with shock, brooked no argument. Sterling lunged for the wire transfer form, greed distilled into motion. But Ammani had already done what she had to do. She had snatched the authorization earlier and kept it pressed against her chest beneath her great-grandfather's dictionary. Sterling's hand stopped inches from her face. Harrison's voice dropped like thunder. Touch her and I'll have you arrested for assault of a minor on top of fraud. Sterling froze. Hatred burned in his eyes, but he backed away. Within 2 minutes, the television screen in the study flickered. Professor Omar Wilson appeared on video, an older man with kindly eyes and a lifetime of manuscripts behind him. He leaned forward, peered intently at the high-resolution images Catherine placed under the camera's guidance. Where did you acquire this? He asked softly. He turned the page, zoomed, squinted, and finally shook his head. I'm afraid this is not authentic. Sterling rounded on the screen. That's nonsense. Professor Wilson was clinical, a teacher correcting a sloppy student. The calligraphy is exquisite, but it is Ottoman-influenced Diwani, not the local administrative hand you would expect for an Emirati family deed in the 17th century. Zoom the seal. Catherine obeyed. The eagle stared back from the pixelated close-up. The Algile seal has always featured a falcon, he said. This is an eagle motif, a decisive mismatch. Look at the wax. Its sheen suggests modern polymer additives, not the oxidized, dense resin centuries would produce. And the ink? This is a carbon-based ink. Real iron gall ink from that period eats into the fibers. You should see oxidation halos, feathering, the halos around strokes. This sits on the surface. Manufactured, modern. As he spoke, Harrison's color drained. Sterling's carefully constructed poise shattered. The Lebanese man's hand twitched toward the doorknob. Catherine tightened her grip and stepped forward, blocking him with a look that said, "You are not leaving my house." Harrison's jaw locked. He looked around the study, at the cracked crystal, at the shredded paper fragments Ammani had pulled earlier, at the wire transfer form still trembling in the girl's arms. Call my legal counsel. Call my bank. Lock every account tied to this transaction. Security, hold them. Sterling sputtered threats, offers, denials. You have no proof. This is ridiculous. His voice dissolved under the professor's steady, slicing facts and the cold, legal machinery Harrison now set in motion. Minutes later, the first uniformed security officer from Harrison's building arrived, followed not long after by a quieter confirmation call. Local police were en route. Sterling sat because Harrison ordered him to. The Lebanese and Egyptian associates tried to bargain, pleaded ignorance, tried to name an angry litany of excuses. Harrison listened like a man who just discovered he had been robbed wearing his own clothes. Grace clung to Ammani but did not smother her. Pride and terror warred in her face. Catherine's hands trembled around a glass she no longer sipped. Harrison's face had gone old in an afternoon. Ammani, tiny and unbowed, felt the strange, dizzying rush of being seen, not as invisible staff or a background detail, but as the fulcrum on which an entire empire of lies balanced. Outside, the city pulsed unaware. Inside, for the first time in her life, Ammani Lewis had punctured the gilded bubble. The men who'd thought themselves untouchable sat restrained by the weight of evidence, by a girl's stubborn ear for truth, and by the slow, inexorable turning of institutions called to answer. She pressed the dictionary to her chest like a talisman. Sergeant Isaiah Lewis's handwriting glowed in faded blue. Truth, she had learned, might whisper, but tonight the whisper had become a crisis that could not be ignored. The ink just sat on the surface. No oxidation, no haloing, just as her great-grandfather taught her. And now, here was Professor Wilson confirming every lesson, every late night she'd spent with that tattered leather dictionary under a flickering lamp. His voice carried the quiet weight of truth. "The most obvious error," he said, adjusting his glasses, "is in the text itself. The deed references Sultan Ahmad II, yet Ahmad didn't ascend until 1691. This document is dated 1680, 11 years too early." Silence filled the room like fog. Everyone felt the floor shift under their feet. "Who spotted it, Omar?" Harrison asked, voice a low tremor. "Who brought this to your attention?" Harrison turned slowly toward the shattered floor, where a small girl stood barefoot among glittering crystal. "Her," he said hoarsely. "A 12-year-old girl." Professor Wilson's eyebrows lifted. "May I speak with her?" Ammani stepped forward, glass crunching beneath her shoes, her heart hammering so hard she thought they might hear it. She faced the glowing screen. "Hello," she said softly. "Hello, young lady. What's your name?" "Ammani Lewis." "How did you learn to authenticate Arabic historical documents?" She lifted the worn dictionary. "My great-grandfather, Sergeant Isaiah Lewis, he was one of the monument's men in World War II. He taught me everything about preservation, calligraphy, and forgeries." Recognition flashed across the professor's face. "Isaiah Lewis? Good heavens! His research on Abbasid-era authentication is still cited in my classes. You carry his legacy well, Miss Lewis." For a long moment, no one spoke. Harrison Taylor, the billionaire who hadn't yet looked at her twice in 12 years, stared as if seeing her for the first time. His lips trembled. "How long have you been able to read Arabic?" "Since I was 8. "You taught yourself?" "Yes, sir. With this book, MIT Open courses, and YouTube lectures." Catherine let out a faint breath. "Omar, how advanced would you say her understanding is?" Wilson leaned closer, eyes bright. "She distinguishes Ottoman from Emirati calligraphy, Iron Gall from carbon inks, Sultanate timelines, and dialectic variants across regions. That's graduate-level expertise. Extraordinary." He turned to the camera again. "Harrison, this young woman just saved you from catastrophic loss, and perhaps from ruin." Harrison's face hardened into cold fury. He faced Sterling Davis. "How many others have you deceived?" Sterling said nothing. His silence was answer enough. "I'm calling the FBI's Financial Crimes Division," Harrison said flatly. "And my lawyers. You'll answer for this." The door burst open. 2 security officers entered, hands on holsters. Sterling and his men instinctively stepped back. "Going somewhere?" Harrison asked. "Nobody leaves this building." Sterling glared at Ammani, his mask finally shattered. "You stupid!" "That's enough," Catherine cut in sharply, stepping between them. "You'll speak to the police, not to her." Harrison moved closer to Ammani, glass crunching beneath his shoes. His voice broke. "You saved me. My company. My name." Ammani didn't move. She stood straight, steady. "For 12 years, he said, voice shaking, I treated you and your mother like furniture. Invisible. And yet you saw everything. You had the courage to speak truth when grown men trembled to. Grace appeared in the doorway, tears streaking her cheeks. Harrison turned toward her. "Mrs. Lewis, I owe you both my deepest apology. Your daughter just displayed more intelligence, integrity, and bravery than I've ever seen in this house." He faced Ammani again. "Where did you apply for scholarships?" "Carleton Academy," she whispered. "They rejected me." "Not anymore." He picked up the phone. "Full scholarship. The best tutors money can buy. Study wherever you want in the world." Ammani's eyes widened. Grace covered her mouth, trembling. "And you, Mrs. Lewis," Harrison continued softly. "You're done cleaning this house. I want you to be my curator, guardian of the art your father once protected. Full salary, pension, benefits." Grace sobbed silently. Professor Wilson's voice echoed from the screen. "Miss Lewis, when the time comes, Georgetown would be honored to have you. I'll personally ensure you receive a full scholarship." The sound of sirens wailed outside. Blue lights flashed through the windows. Harrison looked at the shredded contract in his hands, then tore it once more, the fragments drifting like snow through the wreckage of glass and ink. The police entered, Detective Sarah Moore in plain clothes, badge glinting at her belt. She took one look at the room. 3 trembling men in suits, a billionaire clutching shreds of paper, and a young black girl standing tall amid the shards. "Somebody want to tell me," she asked, "what in God's name happened here?" Harrison's voice was clear, cold, and certain. "These men attempted to defraud me of $250 million using a forged document." He turned toward Ammani. "And that girl exposed them all." "She's the one who exposed them," Harrison said, his voice steady now, stripped of arrogance, heavy with truth. Detective Sarah Moore arched an eyebrow, then turned to the small girl standing barefoot among broken crystal. "You?" Ammani nodded once. "I read Arabic. The document they tried to sell Mr. Taylor is a fake. Wrong seal, wrong ink, wrong dates." Detective Moore scribbled in her notebook. "Name? Ammani Lewis. Age? 12. Her pen paused mid-stroke. She turned to Sterling. "And you are?" "Sterling Davis. This is absurd. The child is making accusations based on expert analysis," interrupted a calm, authoritative voice from the glowing screen. Professor Omar Wilson was still visible, his face grave. "I'm Professor Omar Wilson, Georgetown University Arabic Studies. I've verified the document is indeed a forgery. The young lady's assessment is precise." Detective Moore looked at the screen, then at Sterling. "Mr. Davis, you're under investigation for attempted wire fraud. $250 million. Quite an attempt." Sterling's complexion darkened. "On what grounds?" "Evidence and expert testimony," she replied coldly. "You can explain the rest downtown." The second detective collected Harrison's phone and the forged deed. "We'll need all correspondence, Mr. Taylor." "Of course," Harrison said, handing over everything. "You'll find more than enough." Detective Moore turned back to Ammani. "We'll need your full statement. Can your mother be present?" "I'm right here," Grace said, stepping forward. "Good," Moore nodded. "You're both witnesses now." Catherine spoke from the side. "Detective, Professor Wilson's video analysis is recorded. You'll want a copy." "Excellent, thank you." Moore turned toward the fraudsters. "Gentlemen, let's go." Sterling refused to move. "I want my lawyer." "You can call from the station," she said evenly, "after booking." As they were led out, cameras flashed in the lobby below. Security had already called the press. Reporters swarmed. "Mr. Davis, is it true a child exposed your scam?" "How many others have you conned?" "Who's the girl?" Sterling said nothing, jaw clenched, as flashbulbs chased him into the back of a squad car. Upstairs, Detective Moore turned to Ammani. "They'll want to talk to you too, not tonight, but soon. Big case. You did good, kid." "Thank you," Ammani said softly. When the police left, the apartment felt hollow and strangely sacred. like a battlefield after the storm. The broken glass gleamed under city lights. Harrison faced Grace and her daughter. "I need to say something." His voice cracked. "I grew up poor. My mother cleaned houses too. I promised myself I'd never forget where I came from, but I did." He swallowed. "I became the kind of man who measures worth in money and skin color. I forgot that brilliance hides everywhere. If only we'd look." He turned to Ammani. "You taught me that. You taught me humility." Grace's eyes brimmed with tears. "The curator position," Harrison continued, "isn't charity, it's trust. 60,000 a year, full benefits, pension. You'll manage this collection, every piece in it." Grace covered her face, shaking. "And you, Ammani," Harrison said, kneeling so his eyes met hers. "Carleton Academy, tutors, travel, college, everything you need. I can't undo what I said or how I treated you, but I can start doing right." Catherine placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're not alone in that. We all can do better." Ammani hugged her mother, tears spilling. For the first time, the silence wasn't painful. It was peaceful. 9 months later. Carleton Academy's flag fluttered in the spring air. In front of her 8th grade class stood Ammani Lewis, no longer the invisible cleaning girl, her uniform crisp, her posture proud. On her desk sat the worn leather dictionary that once saved a man's empire. After school, she rode the subway not to clean, but to work, cataloging artifacts beside her mother. Grace Lewis, chief curator. Grace's name was etched on the office door now, and 5 people reported to her. Harrison had changed too. His company launched the Hidden Talent Initiative. Every employee, from janitors to executives, submitted a skills inventory. The results stunned him. His night guard had a PhD in math. His receptionist spoke 5 languages. He promoted 11 people that month, funded education for dozens more. CNN called it revolutionary. Harrison called it late but necessary. Every interview, he told Ammani's story. "We walk past brilliance every day," he said on 60 Minutes. "We just don't bother to look." Her story spread, Harvard case study, TED Talk, documentary. But for Ammani, the real victory was quieter. She and her mother